Hi there, this is Jason from English Raven, and this is, I think it's the fourth installment, or the fourth version of my Open English templates. I've named this one On the Money, and as you can see, we've got a picture of some coins here. And money, well, money affects everybody, and it's one of those topics that is always going to give you something in the classroom, in my opinion. And I've used, as per my other materials, a sort of idiom or a turn of phrase, which in itself could be an interesting starting point. Um, Now, this is going to be interesting because I'm going to sort of, the way I've designed this particular template, um, I'm actually going to start the lesson with a bit more of a language focus rather than a conversation focus, or I'm going to let the conversation flow out of that initial focus on language. So again, we might just talk about this phrase on the money and what that means. But then here in part A, I've got this grid here. And what I would probably ask my students to do is to look at this picture, to think about the notion of money, and to come up with some words in different grammatical parts of speech categories. Excuse me. So I might ask them to say, try to think of 5 nouns that relate to the idea of money and wealth, 5 verbs, 5 adjectives, and 5 adverbs. Now, of course, this really does depend on level, and age. So I might even make these 2 columns about nouns, and this one about verbs, and this one about adjectives. Or I might say nouns, verbs, adjectives, and then come back to nouns, or just put in random words related to money, but you may not be sure of what grammatical category they are. So this could be more of a exploration area for the students. And again, we've got the space to the side where we can do board work, we can share these words, we can discuss them a little bit. So yeah, that can be a really useful. Now, as I said, that's really starting with something a little bit grammatical. And some people, oh no, we've got to have a lot of conversation first, and there's got to be a lot of schema. I would argue, though, in some classes, some lessons, it's good to have a bit of a different approach to things. And some students really like to get really gritty with the language to start with. I mean, that's what we're here for. We're here to explore language. So it doesn't always have to be about, everybody share their experiences with money and all that sort of stuff. We could start with the language and then get a little bit more personal and conversational based on the words we're generating when we share them. For example, if they've put a word here, costs, for a verb, we can then extend that on the spot in the classroom and say, well, cost. Okay, well, how much did those shoes cost? Or how much do you think a pencil costs? Stuff like that. We can actually get them actually talking with using these basic words as a starting point. Now, based on A, in B, I would probably ask the students to look at all these words that they've got, and we've shared them as a class, so they may get some more, to come up with 4 sentences that are true about them or are true about someone they know. And we've had a brainstorm in terms of vocabulary here at the start, but we're going to extend this more into sentence and statement level. And then we would ask them to share their sentences with a friend and dictate to each other. So they'll turn to a partner, they'll read their 4 sentences, their partner will write them down here, and vice versa. Now, look, it doesn't have to be used that way. In fact, even this first part here, you could start with a bingo game, for example. You could put all sorts of words in here. You could give them if you want to scaffold this a lot more, you could actually write a list of 20 words on the whiteboard, let them put them in here randomly, and play a bingo game where the first student to get a row this way or this way is the winner. I mean, that's something a little bit more game-like that could be a bit of fun. You could even be really, really clever and put up 20 words that consist of 5 nouns, 5 verbs, 5 adjectives, 5 adverbs, but don't tell them that. Just don't tell them what the parts of speech are, but any student who manages to put all the nouns in a row this way or this way is likely to win the bingo game first. So that's a rather clever way of sort of facilitating that if you want to try something a bit different. But also this part here could be done differently. This doesn't necessarily need to be used to apply those words. We might even just get the students to write down 4 questions to ask to another student relevant to this topic, and then write down the answers that they get from that student. It will depend to some extent on what you do with the next page. For example, I would probably use this for a Q&A style activity, which means I probably wouldn't do a Q&A activity here. We don't want to overload it. We don't want to end up repeating stuff too much, I think. But then again, you might like to, for a lower level class that needs a little bit more help, you might like to brainstorm as a class 4 questions, try them out with a partner, and then we can apply that to the rest of the class here. So it's just about options. There's lots and lots of different ways that you can apply these templates. Again, though, as we're sharing the work and reporting back to the group the sorts of stuff we do, we've got this space here for the students to write down notes based on what we're producing up on the board, little notes, good turns of phrase, good use of grammar, mistakes, the way some things could be improved. And that's always part of my approach in the Open English material. Again, this is up to you. You could do something completely different. You could have them do a dictogloss style activity in here, or go and source some material from in a book or an internet and actually write a script in here. You could do whatever you like. But my general approach here would be to do some word work related to this idea of money, then to build some sentences relevant to this theme of money, to share those sentences before we move on to the next page. But again, you could use it differently. Now, looking over at C, I've got here a sort of a smaller version of what I call a Wizard English grid. If you go to my blog and go to the search box in my blog and type in Wizard English Grid, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. It's something that I've plugged extensively in the past on my blog. Just the idea of a basic grid and just hundreds of different ways you can use it. Now, we mentioned before the potential for a bingo game here. Well, if you didn't play a bingo game here, you could potentially play bingo here. Or what we could do is tell the learners 1, 2, 3, I want you to make 3 questions related to this theme. Alright, so 1, 2, 3, they'll be your question boxes, and now I want you to ask, this column here will be dedicated to that question, this column here will be dedicated to this question, and this column here will be dedicated to that question. So they could almost mark in darker lines to make columns here, and a darker line across here to indicate that's the break for the questions. And then the idea would be to make sure that each one of these boxes is a response from a different student. So they'll have to talk to 9 other students, and they'll ask question 1 to one student, a different student, a different student. So they'll get a rich variety of responses in here based on those 3 questions. And I mean, because this is related to money, we're talking stuff like, how important is money to you? If you had lots of money, what would you buy? Those kind of questions. And they're things that we could brainstorm as a group. Take some notes over here. We could generate, say, 5 to 10 questions, and then let them choose from those questions to put them in here, which will just help those classes that look at this and go, oh, I can't think of any questions. So we can always facilitate that using this space here. We would then get students to go through this sheet and report their findings to the class, which is a great way of going from the first and the second person to the third person. So if they write here, the question was, what do you want to buy? And the answers they get here are, I want to buy a new car, I want to buy new clothes, I want to buy a new computer. Then when it's time to report to the class, we can show them how to move into the third person and say, well, Stephanie I spoke to Stephanie and she wants to buy a new car. So we can make that transition from direct first, second person over into third person. And again, we can do some language work on the board to help them work out how that happens if we need to. So that's how to use it in terms of a question and information gathering exercise. And look, the reason I put it here is this always works well, especially when your students get in a rhythm with it. I find that this is my default style activity. I can go in with a grid and do this sort of Q&A and do all sorts of stuff with it, and it always works. It never fails. It's just one of those simple things, one of those simple techniques. But as I said, it really does depend on how you organize the flow of your lesson from this stage to that stage to that stage. And again, the beauty of the Open English style is that you could start with C. I mean, we could make questions start with questions based on this theme of money, gather some information from other students, and then go and do A and B based on our dialogue here. What words could we put in a noun section or a verb section, and then we could do a grammar. We could flip this so that the grammar and the language exploration and the precision comes later. So you've got that option, and I think that's what good materials allow you to do. They give you options to work from more words and language building up into communication and interaction, or the other way around, an initial amount of communication and interaction with more reflection and analysis and exploration afterwards. And that's what I love about flexible materials. Remember also though, because you've got access to an open source version of this, you can cut out any of these, including this one as well, and you could replace it with any of those other grids or other activity styles that I've mentioned in other Open English materials. Because they're open source, you can cut and paste, delete, move stuff around, do whatever you like. So that's the On the Money resource. I hope it's given you some teaching ideas, and I look forward to bringing you another Open English lesson quite soon. This is Jason from English Raven. Thanks for being with me.